Good afternoon, friends, neighbors, countrymen, and barrel-chested freedom fighters all around the world. And what is on the old paratrooper's mind today? Well, I've been thinking about, and it's been on my mind for, 10, 15 years. Uh, we need to seriously reevaluate leadership in today's Department of Defense and in our military. Because what we're doing is not working really well. It seems like today's high ranking leadership, once they reach a certain level, whether they be enlisted or they be a high ranking officer or a flag officer, they kind of seem to forget what's important or their focus. Now, there are exceptions. I have met some officers and senior leaders that I would follow to hell just for the sheer pleasure of hanging out with them. But we've got some significant issues today, and I think the problem stems from the head. For example, we've got recruiting shortfalls across all our services. That is a significant issue. I think that's also a cultural issue because many of the young men and women today are not even capable of meeting the minimum physical requirements to go off to their respective service basic training. And that's a cultural issue, but that's also an issue that we as leaders have to be able to solve. We have some significant quality of life issues in many of our installations today. And even, for example, extremely substandard barracks, soldiers living in barracks that probably would have been condemned 20 years ago or should have been condemned 20 years ago. And we don't seem to be putting much focus on that. And Joe knows when you don't care about him. He picks up on that pretty quick. Another example is his pay and benefits. We literally have the Army telling its junior enlisted to go on food stamps. What world is that even? That should not be an option. You have to pay your soldiers enough to live. Good Lord. And equipment. I don't think very many people realize this, but we have serious equipment shortfalls. And because what we're doing, and don't get me wrong, I want to see Ukraine win its war against the Russians. But for some reason, despite the billions of dollars in aid that we're throwing at them, and no telling how much of it's getting siphoned off to oligarchs, corrupt middlemen. That's another story. But we're stripping equipment from active duty U.S. Army units and National Guard units to give to the Ukrainians. I mean, as much money as we're giving the Ukrainians, couldn't they just maybe buy some off the Taliban? We left a bunch of stuff there, too. Now, our current military, it seems like the big thing focuses combating white supremacy in the military. Yeah. Shouldn't we be focusing on fighting and defeating near-peer enemies like China, Russia, Iran, deterring aggression? That seems to me like that's what we should be focusing on. And I read today that we're going to spend millions of dollars to rename army bases across the country. That's foolish. The names of those bases are relics from a different time. From a lot of these installations like Fort Benning, Fort Bragg, Fort A.P. Hill, Fort Hood, they started out as camps in World War I. all in the South for the most part, and they were named after Civil War Confederates because oftentimes, if not the majority, then sizable minority of Southern young men were being brought into the military, and the Army wanted to kind of like heal that rift of that Civil War that was 50 years prior. And if naming a base after some obscure or not very good Confederate general is a way to do it, fine. I don't think the average enlisted man thinks too much about the name of Fort Bragg. If he thinks Fort Bragg or Fort Campbell, he's thinking 101st Airborne, 82nd Airborne, Fort Hood. Oh man, that's armor country. Joe, he's not worried about that. He would like to have a barracks that does not have black mold in it. Or maybe pay him enough that he can have a wife and maybe a kid or two and not be on food stamps. That's probably a little bit more important to him. Now, operationally, the U.S. seems to do very well, for the most part, at the lower level. And I'm talking squad, platoon, company, battalion, brigade. But grand strategy, we suck. Good example in Afghanistan, we basically refought we didn't fight a 20-year war against the Afghanis. We fought the same war over and over and over for 20 times. And that's a similar complaint to Vietnam. Iraq, relatively peaceful, semi-prosperous. I mean, I'm going to call that one a win. And the people that we have in charge today, go back to the Afghanistan mess, nobody got fired out of all of that. I mean, the only person that got fired was a Marine Lieutenant Colonel who called out the flag officers. That tells me something's wrong. There's something wrong with the way we promote people. Our current Secretary of Defense, for example, he had a great reputation as an airborne infantry battalion commander when this was in 80s, late 80s, or early 90s, I can't remember exactly when. His performance as CENTCOM was not that great. And now, as Secretary of Defense, his focus does not really seem to be on warfighting. There's a host of others. Jim Mattis was a big disappointment as Secretary of Defense too, and he, at a tactical level, he was very, very good. Maybe we're just promoting the wrong people to general. Maybe we need to have people who are willing to say to their boss, "No, sir, this is a bad idea. No, sir, this is a waste of money. No, sir, if we do this, we're going to get our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines killed for no good reason." We don't have leadership that is willing to fall on its sword over principle. And that is a significant mistake. Getting back to our problems, I mean, we have the recruiting shortfall that we have continues, and yet at the same time, we're kicking out tens of thousands of soldiers, sailors, and airmen Marines for not getting vaccinated for COVID. And strangely, I can't remember which year it was. I think it was either 2020 or 2021. The Department of Defense had something like 30 or 40 DOD civilian employees and service members die of COVID-19. Yet at the same time, we had around 500 DoD civilians, and more importantly, U.S. service members commit suicide. So that kind of shows you where their priorities are. It's more about appeasing political masters and moving on to that next rank than focusing on the mission and taking care of our soldiers. And that's my rant for today. So, all my friends, go out there, continue to watch your six, continue to train. God bless America. And every day we work at getting a little bit better and fixing our problems. God bless each and every one of you.